Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Casperless episode of Marketing Corner, where I'm again joined with by Birte Steen from Raw Consulting and Jacco from Winning by Design. Thank you for coming back. How have you been since the last time I saw you?
It's been. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. I love this.
Yes.
Birte, how are you?
We had so much fun since last time.
Yeah, so much has changed since last time.
A lot of stuff has happened. We've been at the SaaSiest conference, listening to Jacco on stage, which we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Was the opening too much, or do you think that got everybody going?
I think it definitely went everyone going. You are such an amazing person on stage, and I think it pumped up the volume for many that had a late evening.
I
that
noticed
everyone's attention.
When I walked in, everybody's doing the coffee and donuts, and I realized, okay, last night was a good night. That was a party night.
Absolutely. But do you have a DJ background or something?
No,
you always play this amazing music.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love music. I think I'm a very emotional person or a dramatic person. So I love the drama of a good entrance. And famous lady Maya Angelou once famously said, when you give what is important is not what you said or how you said it, but how you make a person feel.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them remember. And so that's why I just want to make sure that when we have a group like that, I want people to feel happy and joyful and just feel like, yeah, they're having a good time.
I think the biggest eye-opener for me was that after that, you popped a Red Bull. It should be the other way around, surely.
Yes, no.
I'm going to just do the Verdane Open, but I'm going to keep that for the Verdane part too, because I love that. So just, yeah. Hi, and welcome to the Verdane Way podcast, where I'm once again joined by Jacco and Birte Steen. So good to see you guys again. So Jacco, let's talk about, you just got off the stage at SaaSiest, where you blew our minds once again, not only with a new funnel, but sort of a new way of imagining the funnel in this AI era. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, give us your talk for all the people who didn't get a chance to come to SaaSiest. What did they miss?
Well, first of all, if you were not at SaaSiest, you missed a fantastic event. I love the community. I thought that the whole group of people, this community here is quite special, I have to say. And we often see it as in markets like this, where a group of people really binds together, and it's just a great vibe. What did I present? So, look, historically, if we look at the bow tie, historically, we look very much at the left side of the bow tie as in the form of representing acquisition. What we're looking at is like hiring salespeople to grow and developing enough leads in order to feed enough sales. So that has historically been, that's what we refer to as the left side of the bow tie, the acquisition. Then we have on the right side of the bow tie, which is retention and expansion, and often represented with a circle that goes in between those two, there's a closed loop between those two. You retain people, you expand, and so on and so forth. That takes place on the right side of the bow tie. Those two have formed, and historically they formed the foundation of SaaS. Okay, now we could argue how many companies have adopted the right side of the bow tie approach, and arguably 1 in 10 would be very accurate. Most companies are very focused on the acquisition part, but not as much focus on retention and expansion. So that is all given. That's where we are showing up today with. That's nothing new. What we today see and what we've learned is over the past months, we have analyzed native AI companies and recognized that they are following an accelerated growth path. And today I presented what that growth path was, and that it was recognizable, that we have been able to identify where it comes from. What they do different is that they use users to generate pipeline. That means there's not only an arrow on the left from in the bow tie that goes to acquisition. There's also an arrow that points back from existing customers and it goes left. In other words, users generate pipeline. Mm-hmm. This is a concept that over the past weeks, as we try to explain that to people, is very hard to use, to contemplate. They think they got it, but the reason where the challenge is the difference between I want a company and I want a group of users. A company doesn't talk about your logo. A company logo goes on the slides and says like new one, we make sure we retain it and expand it. But to look at a company you want as a group of, let's say, 20 users that actively use your product, talk about your product, And as a result, Generate Pipeline is a foundational new approach that seems to be very obvious, but is not. It is very complex for companies to even think about it. They often think it's retaining. And where that challenge comes from is simply this. Users, when we look today and when we look at like how people buy and how we currently are selling, is we're using email and phone calls and LinkedIn messages. And those have become very fatigued. So today we're no longer responding to emails as much, right? We're no longer responding to LinkedIn messages. So that channel by itself is becoming less and less accessible. So where do we today go to and learn from if we want to buy something? We talk to a peer. We ask them questions. What are you using? How do you like it? Would you recommend it? And so on and so forth. That means that today the users are essentially have become a very critical part of the pipeline, because the messages that we are sending out to prospects are no longer getting their way through. And as a result, we now need to rethink and rewire our marketing campaigns, not to necessarily target only leads, but also to develop campaigns for users. And the great thing about users is that they, by definition, have a built-in ICP profile. They are the audience that you're expecting to target. That's the reason why they're users. That's the reason that they are not generating lead flow, they're generating opportunity flow.
All right.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. So Birte, did you have some questions for Jacco based on?
Yeah, no, I just, and you also mentioned on stage that despite this, right, and I think that everyone listening are struggling with pipeline. It's a persistent problem. And still, 95% of go-to-market costs are still on the left side of the bow tie, on the acquisition side. Why do you think this mindset persists when there's so much potential on the right side?
The reason why this persists, Birte, is because we have a tendency as human beings, like I spoke about before, about reasoning by analogy. So we stay within what we know and we make small modifications to it. And what we see today is that the first principles are being challenged. The first principle historically that we grew on was there was plenty of enough of opportunity, and as a result, working on just after lead flow was the right way, and the cost was relatively low. If you go back 10, 15 years, when we started to put the foundation in of this, SEO was very affordable. SDRs were very cheap ways. Sending out emails was very cheap. And actually had a high response rate, right? Mm-hmm. Those first principles have been challenged. Now, we stick with reasoning by analogy. We just do more of the same, just change, like it could be as simple as changing the amount of emails you send and so on and so forth. But that reasoning by analogy no longer holds true. And as a result, today we need to look and go back to the basics and say like, hey, how do customers really buy? And as we see, they no longer buy from an email outreach campaign. They simply start talking to people.
And I think that's a super interesting point, because we're seeing all these AI tools to optimize the things we've always done.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing things that can help us literally reframe the way that we do things, right? We have ways of sending more emails that are hyper-personalized. But when we see an email response rate is less than 2%, we keep doing it because
it's still clear that it's not, that the effect of it is dropping.
Yeah.
That's very clear in all numbers, but we still
do it. Yeah, because it's such an entrenched way of doing things, I guess, right?
And that is because the system that we rely on, and system is a combination of process, people, and tools, has been codified in that, right? So it's so codified in our behavior that is the right approach. And today, like we see, is that it's simply being challenged. Now, to change that requires executive managements to understand how their customers are buying and responding to that. Now, I'll give you an idea on a simple way of looking at it. Let's say a company has whatever. I'm trying to use round numbers so I can calculate it out. $10 million in revenue. And let's say that the average price is about $10,000. That means that a company like that, in 10 million recurring revenue at $10,000, has approximately 1,000 customers, right? Now, give me an average amount of users of a standard marketing automation platform or an applicant tracking system. What is an average amount of users? If somebody sells a $10,000 product, what is the average amount of users of that?
I guess, yeah, it depends on your marketing team, but you'll buy one product and have 10 people.
10 people on it, right? So if I have 1,000 customers, how many users would I then have? Times 10?
You do quick now. Yeah.
10,000.
10,000.
Right?
We have the engineer in here. That's
Yeah,
good.
that's it. Like add a zero.
So 10,000. Now, if I would say I would convert, like, would it be fair to say that out of those 10,000 users, one in every 100 users, once a year says something positive about your product. Somebody goes to that person, right, and says like, hey, what are you using and are you happy with it? 1 in 100 would then respond to it. Would that be a fair amount?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's 1% conversion rate. On 10,000 users, that means I got 100 opportunities every year. At the conversion rate, let's call it 1/3, that is give or take 15 to 20, call it 16, that's 16 people, 16 companies. That is $160,000 new worth of pipeline. Now, that now gives me a conversion rate I can measure and improve on and say like, okay, what campaign can I now deploy to make that 1%, 2%? Right? And like the same, so I'm now using the same marketing methodologies that we have used to convert lead to opportunity conversion rate, and I'm now deploying that on user to opportunity conversion rate, right? So I'm looking at that and say like, hey, what campaign would I use? Now, if I ask, and we're sitting here at this the SaaS conference, if I ask, what is the most productive way that you actually get a deal done, right, or get an opportunity started? Most people will say, I meet another person at a conference and we have a sidebar conversation, or a dinner party, right? Like, and I met with 12 others, or we have a small. Well, we can create campaigns around that. We can create like the dinner event and attached to the SaaS shouldn't be oopsie, we need to do a dinner. That should be a structured thing. Maybe you should have a dinner with customers every month. That's a campaign, and maybe you should offer every time when you do that, you bring in 6 users and you bring 6 new opportunities. That is a structured campaign we can put together. That's just a campaign. You can design dozens of other campaigns that are all focused on getting the user experience in front of prospective customers, right? And that is the new world that we're seeing, a new playbook, because as Birte said a second ago, using AI to make the old playbook work simply makes the old playbook not work at lower cost.
Right.
I love that.
Plateauing, because your go-to-market model or system is outdated.
It's outdated.
But what? Oh, sorry.
No, what I wanted to say is like what you're trying to do with those campaigns. The reason why it's so costly is because you're trying to find the right target, and finding the right target in a world that is getting noisier. And noisier. So now we have to deal. Our designs now have to campaign to be designed to stand out among the noise, right? Of all that. And if you think about it, your users already live in that domain. They live in a world of target of the right ICP. So simply working with that and designing campaigns for that, and listing them. There's a famous, and I didn't include that in today's conference. I actually had the slide developed and I chose to do it because, like what I noticed is that we are in the remembrance of World War II. It's, like tomorrow is May 8th. It's exactly 80 years ago. The fact that this is not big news, by the way, is already a sign of how peaceful time we relatively live in, and I say that relatively. But there was a point in that, that reminded me in Dunkirk, during the evacuation of the Allied soldiers in Dunkirk. The big ships could no longer get them across, and so I think that, and I may butcher it. It says like, when the soldiers wanted to come home but couldn't, home came for them. And so what happened was, thousands of little ships, or I think it was 600 or 700 little ships came up and picked up the soldiers. Home came for them. And what this tells us, right, is look, if we're in trouble in growth, why don't you go to the people who got you there, to your customers, and enlist them in helping you grow? And you don't go to a customer brand name. You don't go to the executive who made the purchase. What I'm trying to avoid is is this shooting another use case video and putting that? No, that's not what I'm saying. That's helpful too. I'm saying is go to the users and have them talk about in user conferences and in user groups, and create 3 different tiers of users, create ambassadors, create specialists, create like certain cohorts of users, and develop specific campaigns for those cohorts, the same way you would target a specific ICP group. That is a concept that today we do accidental and not by choice.
Absolutely. And that's something, that I think as a marketer, I know this. I know word of mouth, dark funnel, right? That's kind of what we've been calling it, is the stuff you can't measure, but hearing it on a podcast, seeing it on Reddit, you can kind of track Reddit now. But the thing that would come up time and time again is, but we can't measure that. And you shouldn't be spending money on customers. You should be spending money on getting new customers. Don't spend the money on existing customers, which from a common sense point of view makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, because that's how you kind of operationalize word of mouth. But it's, I think we talked about the kind of entrenched, this is the way we've always done it, so this is how it has to be. So how do you kind of break through the barriers and get people to go, you know what, marketing, 30% of your budget or 95% of your budget, let's spend it on actually retention and expansion as opposed to new customer acquisition?
Well, ideally what I would have, in an ideal situation, the old ways of working would have stopped working and would have caused so much dismay that it would lead to a lot of firings of people who did the old way.
Revolution.
Oh, wait, we are there? Wait, okay, so we're there.
We're there.
Yeah. So the point is like, look, this is no longer like I have to convince you. The way at this point in time is like, okay, well, of course you can keep going where you keep doing what you keep doing. But if you hear the old playbook is no longer working, everybody's aching for a new playbook. Well, here's a new playbook. Now, the way you do that is you put a metric on it. You say it's like, hey, this is the metric we're going to aim for. And I think the idea of calculating, simple calculation, how many customers do we have? What's the average amount of users? Or get the total amount of users. It's fine too if you have that in your data. How many customers? I got 5,000 customers. How many users? I got on average 5 users. Okay, that's 25,000 users. Is it fair to say that 1 in 100 users will once a year act as a positive reference and create an opportunity for us? Yes, that's fair. That's 1%. What can we do? What campaign can we go around it? Right? Like you create it in this world. Yes. I believe that this comes very natural. I believe that what we see, the reason why AI companies grow so fast, because they do this natively. When you see Cursor growing so fast, or pick any other customer, right? Like any rapid AI company, they grow so fast. Cursor didn't grow from 1 to 100 million in a year because they hired 100 salespeople on day one and started deploying them, right? And they do it natively. And what do I mean with natively? Is they don't think about it the way we don't think about breathing. Breathing is native. Your heartbeat is native. You don't think about it, you just do it. Well, companies like Cursor, they don't think about, I need to do it. They naturally think about the user. It comes natural to them to measure what the user engagement is. And metrics like MAU, WOW, DAU, monthly active users, daily active users, weekly active users, and the metrics associated with that, that's for them, that came in from day one. They didn't have to convince senior management that this needed to be measured. It was just measured from day one.
It just makes sense.
It makes sense. And they needed it to develop the right features for the product because they had limited resources and they needed sure to categorize the product features the right way. So they go like, we might as well measure it. Well, it doesn't come native to companies at SaaS who are operating at $15 to $20 million right now, who still think in customer logos. I got to win more customers and I got to make sure I don't lose those customers, which is, I think in acquisition and think in retention. What we are saying now is like, no. Look at your customers and think of them as generating pipeline. Like think of it that way, not retention, not even expansion. I'm not talking about acquisition, playbook 1. I'm not talking about retention, playbook 2. I'm not talking about expansion, playbook 3. I'm talking about a whole new playbook. And it says, generate pipeline from your current users.
I have to ask a question because I'm thinking a lot of listeners might be wondering now. So what are the early signs that a company is ready to start generating pipeline from their customers? Because I'm hearing a lot of excuses coming maybe.
Yeah.
We're not there.
I think that the volume often is what the first, we don't have the volume.
Yeah?
But the volume, here's the beautiful thing, and think about it this way. I'll explain the model at scale so that later on when we scale it back, we go like, and you see it still works at small scale. So at the big scale, which I also showed at the conference today, I showed that this company that operates right at about like 500, that was a company that demonstrated $500 million in ARR. And they need to generate every quarter between 15 to 20,000 leads to keep the growth up. Now, just imagine the ridiculousness of this. Like this company, every quarter, 15,000 to 20,000 leads, which per month comes down to what, 6,000, 7,000 leads, right? That's insane.
Yeah, that's impossible. That makes my marketing heart race.
And every month you start at zero, right? Now, why is that? Because the more you grow, the more leads you need in order to grow. And as your leads convert at a slowly degrading pace, you're going to continuously need to have an increase in lead flow. It's pure, simple mathematics. Okay, but now look at this, Birte. I am growing and generating leads based on the amount of users I have. So as I grow, I automatically get more users. Those users automatically generate more pipeline. That forms what we call a closed loop. That closed loop means the faster I grow, the more growth is generated by whatever I just created. So if you now see that this system works at scale, I can now say, will that work at a small scale? Well, if I operate at $1 million and I'm operating on $10,000 deals, I have 100 customers, I have on average 4 users, I have 400 users, I can tell you, because your targets are smaller at that point in time, your opportunity is bigger. And this is the key, the little key that we found to realize where the math works. You can't think in logos. You can't measure how many customers I've won. You got to go and say, how many users do we have, right? And then the second thing that you got to that we felt was important, an active user, when somebody comes to them and says like, hey, what are you using and do you recommend it? Doesn't generate a lead, because a lead converts at 1 to 2%. It generates an opportunity, which converts at 30%.
You've kind of skipped the first part of the...
You skip the first part, right? Because and that is, they are built-in targeting, right? They're built in. And so now, if you then have 500 users, the cost of creating a good community and tier those users is significantly lower. So the whole thing scales properly, right? Now, what we see then is if the system takes off and goes faster, it automatically goes faster. So not only do the costs really work, the speed factor, the velocity also works. So the faster you grow, the faster new users are generated. The same thing we have with the viral loop. Viral loop is sitting all the way at the top of the funnel. It's just people talking, like people talk about Canva and say it's a fantastic product, which it is. And also we are a proud partner with proud vendor to the likes of Canva. But it's just cool to talk about Canva. So Canva as a brand spends virally without people spending on it. What we're now talking about, users are a different group. They are actively speaking and talking about your product and are becoming a form of ambassadors. Birte, does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. And also, in order to actually start doing this tomorrow, so how can we make or evolve customer success into a pipeline generating machine?
Okay. The step that we've recognized, and again, I don't want to sound like, oh, Jacco figured it out, what a brilliant person. We just looked at what companies are doing. Like we just look like, hey, how does a GitLab do this? And we noticed that PLG companies kind of like figured this out, and AI-led growth companies right now are optimizing around that. Okay. And what they do, tier your users, create different cohorts, understand I have ambassadors, people who like it, I have super users, or I have average users that don't really care. And you target those with specific campaigns.
Yeah. So now you're not just cohorting your logos, you're cohorting the users.
That's exactly what you're cohorting the users. And what you find, Birte, is that often super users really want to talk to other super users, and they are not only a super user of your product, they're probably also a super user of 3 other products. And they have other communities they speak to who also are looking for your product. And so those super users actually are a form of highly capable influencers, right? That have a small, an influencer we often think about like in the size of 100,000 or something like following. But these are super users that may only have 20 followers in there. But those 20 followers are all buyers, right? They're all your target audience.
It's sort of a blending of influencers and community-led growth, kind of in a winning by design, manufactured kind of way, not just a haphazard kind of way.
What we see is that, and there's a few simple things that we observe here. One is that it essentially, for many marketers, the bow tie is not that important in a way, because like we said, 95% of the pipeline investment takes place on the top of the pipeline and developing and that towards the close. But now suddenly we tell them, hey, on the right side, there's a whole new world for you that you can go in. And oh, by the way, as of today, this is super important for the listener to realize. You're sitting on this reservoir of users that you can start generating lead opportunities out of tomorrow. Like this is like an untapped reservoir of opportunity, right? Like but it requires a mindset to not think in the company logo that you want, but to think in the users. And this mindset is not native to most companies that are currently operating on a company-based approach.
Exactly, and that's kind of when I was just going to ask about what kind of leadership mindset change that we need to see in order for the teams to be able to do this, right? We talked about the bow tie, how it needs to be owned by the CEO, because it changes how we make decisions. And the same thing, what type of mindset change do you think leadership should have?
Okay. The mindset here is a very data-driven mindset. And it's not like one of religion that says like selling is always done by people. It needs to be my salesperson, or selling is done pipeline. We need to say is like, okay, that's true. And that's historically that probably, but let's take a look at the data, right? Now, that data-centric mindset and a very, I often call it an assumption-based mindset. Make an assumption and then prove the assumption with real data. If you don't make an assumption, then you're not going to. But if I say, is it reasonable assumption that people are less likely to open up email and respond to phone calls? Yes. Okay. So that's likely. Is it more likely that they listen to peers? Yes. It's more likely. Okay. So the users are their peers then. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is it likely? Can we assume 1 in 100 of your users once a year speaks positively about your product and generate an opportunity? Is that reasonable to assume? For all intents and purposes, it's reasonable. Okay? So these 3 assumptions are true. Okay. So why wouldn't we try that out and see if we deploy a campaign while the money spent on all the other campaigns is not generating the deliverables right now? Wouldn't it make sense to try one of these campaigns out, right? Like, yes. Okay. Well, then all it is what would be for our users would be the most likely campaign. Mm-hmm. And you're going to come to find out is like, and literally you can almost like upload the transcript of this podcast, ask ask ChatGPT, what are they talking about? And then simply ask, based on this, what kind of campaign should I use? Now, honestly, I have made it easy for the listener today, is I've created the transcript of the talk already. And so people are listening can ask me via LinkedIn to download this, and I'll send it over. You upload that in ChatGPT, and all you say, ChatGPT, what are they talking about? AKA training. ChatGPT, can you generate here's a profile of my customers. Do you understand the profile of my customers? Can you repeat it back to me? Yes. Can you generate what Jacco is talking about? What are the 5 recommended campaigns? I'm not saying the campaigns are perfect, but I'm telling you, it's the 5 campaigns you're going to go like, okay, well, that's in the right direction. And then you need to tune that.
Brilliant. That's great. Maybe from a tactical point of view, I know this is something I have tried to do at least in a community session, and using HubSpot, you can actually track how engaged your users are. But mix of kind of mixed panel and things like that, but we would say maybe not necessarily in terms of users, but do they attend a webinar? Do they speak at the webinar? Do they talk to us at an event? And as long as you have a way of keeping that data, and that's how we tiered, we had the change makers, were the people who were really like evangelizing, and then we kind of worked it down from there. And then, I mean, user is a next level, but I think there are actually ways, if you have a good CRM person, there's a way to actually track this and measure it, which is what leadership would love to see, right?
And what you're going to see, and I said it before, but it's important to repeat it. The campaigns you would use to develop your users are not very different than the campaigns that you are using to develop leads. That leads is just another reservoir that you've tapped into through nurturing campaigns. Now, with users, you can go a little further, right? But the key here is once you start tiering them in particular cohorts, you automatically are driven already to start developing the right campaigns for them.
Brilliant. Well, we're pretty much out of time, unfortunately. I feel like we could talk about this all day and pick your brains, but is there any last thought that you'd like to leave with the listeners before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I think that it is important to the following. To this group of listeners that we're listening to is like, look, historically, we've copied many of the approaches from the American culture, the Silicon Valley culture. Now, Silicon Valley companies generally make money on their market. And their market is extremely sizable. Everybody wants to go to the US because the market is big. Meaning that per today, the Western European companies, and particularly the Scandinavian companies, if we're speaking about that today, are using a game plan, a playbook that is designed for having access to a large scalable market. That is not necessarily the case today. Now, what you'll see here, that this playbook that I'm presenting here to you today is a very effective playbook for markets who have a local market with a cool following, language protection, cultural. This actually amplifies its capability. And I think that what we're seeing in the world, and I describe this via Netflix, we can say Netflix destroyed the cinematic experience, right? Less movies But I can tell you right now what Netflix also did. It created fantastic local content. I am watching Norwegian crime. I'm watching British spy. I'm watching Korean love episodes nowadays, right? Like, I'm watching content from all over the world. No longer does it just come from Netflix. What Netflix did, it in a way democratized the creation of content, which through technology of high-end cameras and whatnot was accessible already, but now it gave them a distribution platform. What we are seeing today, what AI is doing, it is creating a democratization of the world. You no longer need to build a 100-person sales team out of Silicon Valley on a 30-story of the Salesforce Tower, which you have to invest in $1 gazillion. You now, through AI, can grow. And that growth path that has been depicted says, work with your users and make them successful. And so, in other words, what all this is happening is, folks, we're standing on on the precipice of something absolutely fantastic, and we're just not realizing it yet.
Boom. That's really exciting. I want to go do something now.
Yeah, me too.
I got to get the train back to Copenhagen. But Jacco, wonderful as always, incredibly insightful, and I can't wait to see you on stage again because also incredibly energetic. Birte, any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Just thank you for being here, all the way from America.
All the way.
Yeah, super valuable, very important to our portfolio companies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure and a treat.
Thank you. Bye-bye.